Dr. James Washington spent 15 years building respect as Westfield University's history department chair. All it took was one morning and one racist security guard to change everything. Slammed against a wall, humiliated in front of students. All because he forgot his ID. But when the university board announces their new president that same day, everything changes. Now, as Westfield's first black president, Dr. Washington faces powerful opposition from board members, donors, and those who preferred the comfortable status quo. With students rallying behind him and allies emerging from unexpected places, Dr. Washington isn't just fighting for his position, he's transforming an entire institution. Was Dr. Washington too lenient with Reynolds, the security guard who assaulted him? Or did his decision to include him in reform efforts show true leadership? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Dr. James Washington pulled his tweed jacket tighter as he crossed the university quad. At 45, he'd spent the last 20 years building his academic career, moving from assistant professor to department chair at Westfield University. Today was special. The board would announce their selection for the new university president, and as one of 3 finalists, James felt cautiously optimistic. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as students hurried between classes. James checked his watch, 7 a.m. The early hour meant fewer students to recognize him, which suited him fine. The weight of potentially becoming the university's first black president had kept him awake most of the night. "Morning, Professor Washington," called a student, giving a quick wave. James smiled and nodded, continuing toward the administration building where he needed to drop off some final paperwork before the announcement ceremony at noon. His phone buzzed, a text from his wife Vanessa. "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you." As he approached Hadley Hall, he noticed someone new at the security desk. A stocky white man with a crew cut and an oversized uniform glared at him through the glass doors. James had worked at Westfield for 15 years but hadn't seen this guard before. James pushed through the doors, nodding politely. "Good morning." The security guard, whose nameplate read REYNOLDS, stood up abruptly. "Buildings closed to the public until 9 a.m. I'm Dr. Washington from the history department. I have an appointment with Dean Holbrook." Reynolds folded his arms. "Got ID?" James reached for his wallet, then realized he'd left it in his car after paying for gas. "I apologize, I left my faculty ID in my vehicle. But I've worked here for 15 years, if you call Dean Holbrook's office." "No ID, no entry," Reynolds interrupted, stepping around the desk. "University policy." "I understand, but Dean Holbrook is expecting these papers before her 8 a.m. meeting. Perhaps we could." "You need to leave now," Reynolds said, his voice rising. Several administrative assistants arriving for work stopped to watch. "This is a secure building." James took a deep breath. "I've been a professor here since 2010. My office is on the 3rd floor if you'll just call." "I said leave." Reynolds suddenly grabbed James's arm. "We've had reports of theft in this building." James stiffened. "Take your hands off me, this is completely inappropriate." Instead of releasing him, Reynolds tightened his grip and spoke into his radio. "Need backup at Hadley main entrance. Got an uncooperative individual refusing to leave." "This is absurd," James said, keeping his voice level despite his rising anger. "I'm Dr. James Washington, chair of the history department." "Sure you are," Reynolds sneered, shoving James toward the wall. "And I'm the Queen of England." Before James could respond, Reynolds had grabbed both his arms and slammed him against the wall, knocking the folder of papers from his hands. Documents scattered across the marble floor. "Stay against the wall," Reynolds barked, applying pressure to James's back. "This is outrageous," James said, struggling to maintain his composure as students began to gather outside the glass doors, phones raised. "You're making a serious mistake. People like you always think you can just walk in anywhere," Reynolds muttered, pressing harder. Dean Patricia Holbrook emerged from the stairwell, her eyes widening at the scene. "What on earth is happening here?" "Caught this guy trying to access the building without ID," Reynolds reported. "Claims he works here." Dean Holbrook's face flushed with anger. "Release him immediately. That's Dr. Washington, our history department chair." Reynolds hesitated but maintained his hold. "He has no identification." "I don't need ID to recognize a colleague I've worked with for over a decade," Holbrook snapped. "Release him now." Reynolds slowly loosened his grip, and James straightened his jacket with as much dignity as he could muster. "Dr. Washington, I am deeply sorry," Dean Holbrook said. "Mr. Reynolds is new and clearly hasn't completed proper training." "Apparently not," James said quietly, bending to gather his scattered papers. His hands trembled slightly, but he refused to show how shaken he felt. Reynolds stood awkwardly, his face reddening. "How was I supposed to know?" "Perhaps by listening when I told you who I was," James replied evenly, tucking the papers back into his folder. "Or by calling for verification rather than physical confrontation." Dean Holbrook helped collect the last few pages. Reynolds, report to HR immediately. Dr. Washington, would you prefer to reschedule our meeting? James checked his watch again. No need, Patricia, we still have time before the board announcement. Reynolds cleared his throat. Look, I was just doing my job. Your job, James said, looking directly at Reynolds for the first time, is to ensure campus safety, not to assault faculty members, and I suspect your actions just now have been recorded by several students. Indeed, a small crowd had gathered at the entrance, many holding phones. This isn't over, James said quietly to Reynolds as he walked toward the elevator with Dean Hallbrook, but I have more important matters to attend to this morning. As the elevator doors closed, James exhaled slowly, straightening his tie and preparing himself for the day ahead, a day that would prove far more consequential than even he anticipated. By 10 a.m., video of the confrontation had spread across campus like wildfire. James sat in his office, blinds drawn, trying to focus on his notes for the afternoon class he was scheduled to teach. The persistent buzz of his phone made concentration impossible. 37 messages in 2 hours, he muttered, scrolling through texts from colleagues, students, and local reporters. His department coordinator had already fielded 9 calls from news outlets. A knock at his door broke his reverie. Come in, he called. Dr. Marion Chen, his closest friend on the faculty and chair of sociology, entered with 2 coffee cups. Thought you might need this, she said, placing one on his desk. How are you holding up? James accepted the coffee gratefully. I've had better mornings. The video's everywhere, James. Students are organizing a protest outside the administration building at 11. That's not necessary, he sighed. The last thing we need is more disruption. Tell that to your students, they adore you. Marion leaned against his bookshelf. The board's in emergency session right now, James winced. Over this, their decision about the presidency was supposed to be announced at noon. This changes things, Marion said carefully. The university's response will be scrutinized. How they handle it reflects directly on their leadership choices. His phone buzzed again, Vanessa calling. I should take this, he apologized. Marion nodded and slipped out as James answered. I've seen the video, Vanessa said immediately. Are you okay, really okay? I'm fine, James assured her, though the soreness in his shoulder suggested otherwise. Just embarrassed. Embarrassed? You have nothing to be embarrassed about. That man assaulted you, James. The university needs to fire him today. It's complicated, James began. No, it isn't, Vanessa interrupted. If you'd been a white professor, would he have treated you that way? Would he have assumed you were trespassing? James closed his eyes. We both know the answer. The kids are furious. Zoe's friends are joining the protest. Michael wanted to drive home from state, but I told him to stay put. Good, James said. The last thing I need is our children getting involved in this mess. This mess is exactly why you wanted this position in the first place, Vanessa reminded him, to change the culture there. Another knock at his door. I have to go, Van. I'll call you after the announcement. Dean Hallbrook entered with Theodore Blackwell, the university's general counsel. James stood to greet them. Dr. Washington, Blackwell began without preamble, we'd like to discuss how to proceed regarding this morning's incident. I assume Reynolds has been suspended, James said. Hallbrook and Blackwell exchanged glances. He's on paid administrative leave pending investigation, Blackwell said carefully. Investigation? The entire incident is on video. Standard procedure, Blackwell explained. Human resources requires. What human resources requires, James interrupted, is irrelevant to me. That man didn't just make a mistake, he targeted me. We can't officially state that without. Without what? More evidence of racial profiling? How many white professors has Reynolds tackled this week? Blackwell cleared his throat. The university takes these allegations very seriously. They're not allegations, James said firmly. They're facts witnessed by dozens and recorded from multiple angles. James, Hallbrook interjected, the board wants to speak with you before they make their announcement. About the presidency or about pressing charges against Reynolds? Both, potentially, she admitted. This situation has complicated things. James laughed without humor. Of course it has. When a black academic is publicly humiliated, it always complicates things. The board chairman specifically requested your presence, Hallbrook pressed. They've moved the meeting to 11:30. James glanced at his watch. That's in 20 minutes. I know it's sudden, Hallbrook said, but the university needs to issue a statement and they want your input before finalizing their decision on the presidency. James gathered his papers. I'll be there, but let me be clear, I won't participate in sweeping this under the rug. As they left, James noticed a crowd gathering in the quad below his window. Students were assembling with handmade signs, Justice for Dr. Washington and Black Professors Matter. His phone buzzed with a text from Student Government President Darius Williams. We've got your back, Dr. W. Whatever you need. James straightened his tie, examining his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him appeared composed, but inside a storm was brewing. Years of slights, microaggressions, and doubts about whether he truly belonged had culminated in this moment. As he headed toward the administration building, students and faculty lined the pathway, many nodding respectfully or offering words of support. Others simply watched, their expressions unreadable. James kept his head high. Whatever happened in that boardroom would determine more than just his future, it would signal what kind of institution Westfield truly was. And he was done pretending that race wasn't a factor in how people experienced this campus. The weight of this responsibility settled firmly on his shoulders as he climbed the steps to meet the board, unaware that the university's leadership was facing a crisis that would transform the institution forever. The mahogany doors of the executive boardroom swung open as James approached. Inside, the 14 members of Westfield University's Board of Trustees sat in tense silence around an oval table. Chairman Gerald Whitman, a 72-year-old banking executive whose family name adorned the business school, stood as James entered. "Dr. Washington," Whitman said, gesturing to an empty chair. "Thank you for joining us on such short notice." James nodded, taking in the room. Only two board members were people of color, Dr. Lydia Patel, a renowned neurosurgeon, and Marcus Johnson, a tech entrepreneur who'd graduated from Westfield in the 90s. Both offered subtle nods of solidarity. "Before we begin," James said, remaining standing, "I'd like to know exactly what we're discussing. Is this about the security incident or the presidency?" Whitman cleared his throat. "Both are on the agenda. The events of this morning cannot be separated from our leadership decision." "I see," James replied. "And has the board already made its decision?" "We were prepared to vote this morning," said Victoria Chambers, a silver-haired philanthropist who chaired the selection committee. "But in light of recent events, some reconsideration seemed prudent." James finally took his seat. "Prudent how exactly? Has my candidacy somehow been compromised because I was assaulted by your security staff?" Several board members shifted uncomfortably. "No one is suggesting that," Whitman said, "but we must consider the university's public image. This incident has already gone viral. The wrong handling could damage Westfield's reputation." "And what would be the wrong handling in your view?" James asked. "Rush decisions," offered Robert Crawford, the board's most conservative member. "Emotional reactions rather than measured responses." "Measured responses," James repeated. "Like the measured response of your security guard who slammed me against a wall because I forgot my ID?" Crawford's face reddened. "That was unfortunate, but—" "Unfortunate," James interrupted. "Is that the word we're using for racial profiling now?" "We don't know that race was a factor," Crawford countered. Marcus Johnson leaned forward. "Robert, please, if you can't see how race factored into what happened this morning, you're part of the problem we need to address." "The issue at hand," Whitman interjected, "is how we move forward. The university needs leadership that can navigate this crisis." "This isn't just a crisis to be managed," James said firmly. "It's a symptom of systemic problems at Westfield that I've been discussing throughout my candidacy." Dr. Patel nodded. "Dr. Washington's proposals for institutional change seem particularly relevant today." "Precisely," said Chambers. "Which is why some of us believe this incident, while deeply regrettable, demonstrates why Dr. Washington is exactly the leader Westfield needs right now." Murmurs circulated around the table. James felt a shift in the atmosphere. "The student protest gathering outside suggests similar sentiment," added Johnson, showing his tablet with a live stream of the quad. "They're calling for both consequences for the guard and for Washington's appointment." Crawford scoffed. "We can't let student protests dictate leadership decisions." "No," James agreed, surprising Crawford, "but you should listen to the community you serve. Those students represent Westfield's future." Whitman raised his hand for quiet. "We need to address two immediate concerns. First, our response to this morning's incident. Second, our presidential announcement scheduled for noon." "As to the first," said James, "I expect Reynolds to be terminated, not suspended with pay. I expect a formal apology from the university, and I expect meaningful changes to security protocols and training." "Those seem like reasonable demands," Chambers noted, as several heads nodded in agreement. "As to the second matter," James continued, "I won't withdraw my candidacy. If anything, this morning has strengthened my resolve. Westfield needs change." Whitman exchanged glances with several board members. "Dr. Washington, would you mind stepping outside while we deliberate?" "Before I do," James said, rising, "let me be clear about something. If I'm not selected as president, I will still pursue action regarding this morning's incident. This isn't leverage, it's principle." As James waited in the antechamber, he watched the protest through the window. The crowd had swelled to hundreds. Faculty members had joined students, many wearing Black Lives Matter shirts or carrying hastily made signs. Campus police kept a respectful distance. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Whatever happens, we're proud of you. Stand firm." After 20 minutes, the boardroom door opened. Whitman emerged with Johnson and Chambers. "We've reached a decision," Whitman announced. The board vote was 12-2. James steeled himself, unable to read Whitman's expression. Westfield University would be honored if you would accept the position of president, Dr. Washington, Whitman said, extending his hand. We believe you're the right person to lead this institution forward, especially now. James kept his expression measured despite the surge of emotion. And Reynolds, terminated effective immediately, Johnson confirmed. With a public statement acknowledging the racial component of the incident. The announcement ceremony is in 30 minutes, Chambers added. We'd like to address both matters then with your approval. James nodded slowly. I accept the position. As they walked toward the ceremony site, James realized that this was just the beginning. The real work, transforming Westfield's culture, would be harder than anything he'd faced this morning. But for the first time, he felt he truly had the power to make that change happen. The board members leading him toward the podium had no idea what was coming. Westfield University was about to become a very different place. A sea of faces greeted James as he approached the podium set up on the main quad. What would normally have been a modest gathering for an administrative announcement had swelled to over 1,000 people. Students, faculty, staff, and even community members packed the space, many still holding protest signs that were hastily lowered as James appeared alongside the board members. Camera crews from local news stations jostled for position. The university's public relations team looked simultaneously horrified and fascinated by the unexpected media circus. Chairman Whitman stepped to the microphone first, his patrician features set in a grave expression. Good afternoon. Today marks a significant moment in Westfield University's history, though not entirely for the reasons we anticipated. A murmur rippled through the crowd. James stood just behind Whitman, conscious of every eye upon him, including those watching live streams across the country. His phone had been buzzing non-stop with messages from academic colleagues nationwide who had seen the viral video. Many of you witnessed or have seen footage of an unacceptable incident that occurred this morning in Hadley Hall, Whitman continued. I want to address that situation directly before moving to our planned announcement. The crowd quieted. A member of our security staff physically accosted Dr. James Washington, a distinguished faculty member and department chair. This action was unprovoked, unwarranted, and inconsistent with our university's values. The security officer has been terminated, effective immediately. A cheer erupted from the students, quickly quieting as Whitman raised his hand. Furthermore, the university acknowledges that racial bias played a role in this incident. We are launching a comprehensive review of our security protocols and will implement mandatory anti-bias training for all campus security personnel. James watched the crowd's reaction. Some nodded in approval while others, particularly black students and faculty, showed expressions suggesting this was too little too late. Now, to the purpose of today's gathering, Whitman pivoted. After an exhaustive 6-month search, the Board of Trustees has selected Westfield's next president. The anticipation was palpable. James took a deep breath. It is my great pleasure to announce that Dr. James Washington has been appointed as the 18th president of Westfield University. The reaction was immediate and thunderous. Students erupted in cheers, many jumping to their feet. Faculty members applauded vigorously. Even some of the news crews broke professional decorum to join the applause. Darius Williams, the student government president, led a chant from the front row, Dr. W, Dr. W. As the noise subsided, Whitman gestured for James to approach the microphone. The two men shook hands for the cameras, though James noted Whitman's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. James adjusted the microphone, taking a moment to scan the crowd before speaking. He spotted Marion giving him a thumbs up from the faculty section. His administrative assistant was openly weeping with joy. Thank you, Chairman Whitman and members of the board. I accept this appointment with deep humility and a profound sense of responsibility. He paused, setting aside his prepared remarks. I had a different speech planned for today, one about academic excellence, fundraising goals, and strategic vision. Those things matter and we will address them. But this morning's events demand that I speak more directly about issues that many would prefer to leave unspoken. From the corner of his eye, James saw several board members shift uncomfortably. What happened to me today happens to people of color on this campus and in this country every day. Most incidents aren't captured on video. Most don't result in immediate consequences for the perpetrators. Most victims don't have the privilege of institutional power to demand justice. The crowd was completely silent now. As your president, I cannot promise to eliminate racism from our campus. What I can promise is that we will confront it honestly. We will hold ourselves accountable, and we will create systems that protect the dignity of every member of our community. James spotted a young black student near the front, tears streaming down her face. He remembered being her age, wondering if he would ever see someone who looked like him in a position of university leadership. To our students of color, I see you. I understand the additional burdens you carry. My door will always be open to you. He turned slightly toward the board members. To our faculty and staff, excellence demands inclusion. This isn't about political correctness, it's about ensuring that the best minds, regardless of background, can thrive here. Finally, he addressed the broader audience. To those who think these issues are distractions from our academic mission, you're wrong. We cannot achieve true intellectual excellence while systematic inequities persist. A university that tolerates racial injustice fails at its fundamental purpose, the pursuit of truth. James could sense the tension from some board members, particularly Crawford, whose face had turned a deep shade of red, but others, including Johnson and Dr. Patel, were nodding in agreement. My presidency begins officially next month, but my work starts today. This afternoon, I will establish a presidential task force on campus justice and inclusion. And I invite all of you, especially those who have experienced discrimination, to share your stories and your solutions. He gripped the sides of the podium, his voice strengthening. Westfield can become a model for what a truly inclusive institution of higher learning looks like, not through slogans or symbolism, but through concrete action and accountability. As James concluded his remarks, the applause was deafening. Students surged forward, many trying to shake his hand or take selfies. Faculty members looked at each other with expressions ranging from hope to skepticism to outright worry. Chairman Whitman stepped forward to reclaim the microphone, his tight smile betraying concern about the bold direction James had just outlined. Thank you, Dr. Washington, for those powerful words. We look forward to working with you to advance Westfield's mission. As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, James realized that the real battle was just beginning. He had the title, but transforming the institution would require confronting entrenched power structures and uncomfortable truths. And based on the expressions of several board members watching him from the stage, not everyone was prepared for the changes to come. By 5 p.m., James's office had become an impromptu command center. Student leaders, faculty allies, and administrative staff cycled through with congratulations, suggestions, and concerns. Marion had ordered pizza, which sat half-eaten on the conference table as James reviewed security camera footage from that morning with Theodore Blackwell. "There's more," Blackwell said, advancing to another video. "We found security logs showing Reynolds has stopped 17 people for ID checks in his 2 weeks here. 15 were people of color." James nodded grimly. Not surprising, but good to have documentation. A knock at the door revealed Dean Holbrook with a concerned expression. "You should see this," she said, placing her tablet on the desk. The screen showed an email from Robert Crawford to the entire board, accidentally copied to Holbrook. "Colleagues, this morning's hasty decision threatens Westfield's standing with donors and alumni. Washington's inflammatory remarks demonstrate precisely why we should have selected a more moderate candidate. I propose an emergency session to reconsider before the appointment becomes official." "How many would support him?" James asked. 2, maybe 3, Holbrook replied. "Not enough to reverse the decision, but enough to make your job harder," James sighed. "Crawford represents the old guard. They want diversity as window dressing, not actual change." His phone buzzed, campus security. "Dr. Washington, there's someone here insisting on seeing you, a Mr. Reynolds." James exchanged glances with Blackwell. "Send him up with an escort." Minutes later, Terrence Reynolds entered, flanked by 2 security officers who looked deeply uncomfortable. Without his uniform, Reynolds seemed smaller, his face ashen. "You have 2 minutes, James said coldly. Reynolds shifted his weight. "I came to apologize. I made a terrible mistake." "Did you make a mistake, or did you act on assumptions you've always held?" James asked. "It wasn't about race," Reynolds insisted. "It was about protocol, anyone without ID." "Would you have tackled Dean Whitmore if he forgot his ID?" James interrupted, referencing the elderly white dean of the business school. Reynolds stared at the floor. "That's what I thought," James continued. "Your apology means nothing if you can't acknowledge why it happened." "My brother-in-law worked here for 20 years, Reynolds said suddenly. "He lost his job in the last round of staff cuts. I needed this position. And I'm supposed to feel sorry for you?" James asked incredulously. "No," Reynolds admitted. I've got kids. I've never been fired before. No one will hire security with this on my record." James studied the man before him, not the threatening figure from that morning, but someone desperately trying to save his livelihood. For a moment, he felt a flicker of empathy. Then he remembered the humiliation, the physical pain, the assumptions that no amount of education or accomplishment could shield him from. "Your termination stands," James said firmly, "but I'll have HR classify it as a separation without cause. You'll get 2 weeks severance and a neutral reference." Reynolds blinked in surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because unlike you, I don't make judgments based on a single interaction," James replied. "Now leave my campus." After Reynolds was escorted out, Marion returned with fresh coffee. "That was generous," she observed, "more than he deserved." "This isn't about him," James replied. "It's about who we are as an institution." His phone rang Vanessa. "The kids want to know if they should still come for dinner tonight," she said. "The media is camped outside our house." "Tell them to come," James replied. "We have more reason to celebrate now." As he hung up, his assistant entered looking anxious. "Dr. Washington, several major donors are requesting calls, and Crawford has scheduled a meeting with alumni leaders for tomorrow morning." "Let me guess," James said, "without inviting me." "Correct, and," she hesitated, "some anonymous emails have been circulating among faculty questioning whether your appointment was a knee-jerk reaction to this morning's incident." James wasn't surprised. "Send me the list of donors, I'll call them personally." After she left, Blackwell cleared his throat. "James, you should know what you're up against. Crawford's family has given over $50 million to Westfield. He has significant influence with other donors." "I'm aware," James replied, "but if their support depends on maintaining the status quo, perhaps we need different donors." Marion laughed. "God, I've waited years to hear someone say that." A notification popped up on James's computer, an email from Marcus Johnson with the subject line, "Reinforcements coming." The message was brief. "Just transferred $5 to Westfield's endowment earmarked for your inclusion initiatives. Let Crawford fight that." James smiled for the first time in hours. It seems not all board members share Crawford's concerns. His phone buzzed again. "Darius Williams, students organizing support rally tomorrow. 2,000 plus confirmed." "We've got your back." As evening approached, James stood at his window watching the campus. News vans still lined the entrance. Students gathered in small groups, many wearing hastily printed t-shirts with his photo and the slogan "Washington's Westfield" below. "What are you thinking?" Marion asked, joining him at the window. "That institutions don't change willingly," he replied. "They change when they're forced to confront their contradictions." And Westfield's contradiction. "Claiming to value diversity while preserving systems that exclude," James said, "it ends now." His phone buzzed yet again, the university's communications director. "Dr. Washington, national morning shows want interviews. NBC, CBS, CNN, how do you want to proceed?" James considered for a moment. "Book them all. It's time Westfield's transformation had a national audience." As darkness fell over the campus, James gathered his things. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight he would celebrate with his family. He had fought for this position to make a difference, and despite Crawford's resistance, he now had the platform to do exactly that. The security footage from that morning still played silently on his computer, a painful reminder of why this fight mattered. James shut it off and straightened his shoulders. He wasn't just Westfield's first black president, he would be its most transformative one. The sun had barely crested the horizon when James arrived on campus the next morning. News vans still lined the entrance, reporters clutching coffee cups as they prepared for morning broadcasts. James had given 3 phone interviews before 7 a.m., and his media training was quickly coming back to him. "Dr. Washington," called a reporter as James walked briskly toward his office. "Any response to Robert Crawford's statement?" James paused. "What statement would that be?" The reporter thrust her phone forward, showing a press release issued an hour earlier. Crawford, speaking as a concerned board member, had expressed grave reservations about the hasty nature of Dr. Washington's appointment and called it a reactionary decision driven by social media pressure rather than proper consideration of the university's best interests. "No comment at this time," James said, maintaining his composure despite the anger simmering beneath. "I'll address this at today's press conference." In his office, James found Marcus Johnson waiting, dressed impeccably in a charcoal suit. "Thought you might need reinforcements," the tech entrepreneur said, rising to shake James's hand. "Crawford's gone rogue." "So I've heard," James replied, setting down his briefcase. "How bad is it?" "He's called an emergency donor meeting for 9 a.m., claims to have commitments to withhold over $30 million in planned giving unless the board reconsiders your appointment." James's jaw tightened. "Can he actually deliver on that threat?" "Some of it," Johnson admitted, "but I've been making calls all night. For every donor he's scared off, I've found 2 more excited about Westfield's new direction." James's assistant knocked before entering. "Dr. Washington, Chairman Whitman is on line 1. He sounds agitated." James exchanged glances with Johnson before picking up. "Gerald, good morning. Have you seen Crawford's statement?" Whitman demanded, skipping pleasantries. "Just now," James replied calmly. "I take it he didn't clear this with the board." "Absolutely not. The majority of us are furious, but James," Whitman hesitated, "he's not wrong about the donor situation. Several major contributors are threatening to pull funding, including your family's foundation." James asked pointedly, a pause. "My family supports Westfield regardless of who's president." "I'm glad to hear it," James said, "because I won't be intimidated by financial threats, Gerald." "Not from Crawford, not from donors, not from anyone." "No one's trying to intimidate you," Whitman protested weakly. "Then what would you call it?" Another uncomfortable pause. There's concern about your agenda. Your announcement speech yesterday suggested significant changes to university policy and culture. Those changes are precisely why you hired me, James reminded him. Or did the board suddenly forget my platform after yesterday morning's incident? Johnson gave an approving nod as James continued. Here's what's going to happen, Gerald. The board will issue a statement by noon reaffirming my appointment and denouncing Crawford's unauthorized comments. Crawford will either publicly retract his statement or resign from the board, and we will announce a major new initiative on campus inclusion funded by donations that Marcus has already secured. Whitman sputtered. You can't dictate terms to the board, James. I'm not dictating, James replied. I'm clarifying the conditions under which I'll accept this presidency. The choice is yours. After he hung up, Johnson grinned. Now that's how you handle a board chairman. Let's hope it works, James said. What's the student situation? See for yourself, Johnson gestured toward the window. In the quad below, hundreds of students had already gathered. Many carried signs, "We stand with Washington and no justice, no peace." Faculty members mingled among them, including Marion, who appeared to be organizing some sort of speak-out. James's phone buzzed with a text from Darius Williams. Crawford's at the Alumni Center with about 40 people. We've got 2,000 plus here supporting you. The math speaks for itself. I need to address them, James decided, before this escalates further. 20 minutes later, James stood before the growing crowd. A makeshift PA system had been set up, and student organizers had created a security perimeter to keep media at a respectful distance. Thank you all for your support, James began. It means more than I can express. The crowd cheered. Yesterday morning, I experienced what many of you have faced throughout your lives, being judged not by your character or credentials, but by the color of your skin. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. What happened to me was captured on video and resulted in immediate consequences, but I know that countless similar incidents occur without such resolution. That ends now at Westfield. More cheers erupted. Some would prefer that I focus solely on fundraising and facilities, leaving issues of race and inclusion to committees and task forces. They fear that addressing these issues directly will alienate donors and alumni. James paused, scanning the sea of faces. They're right about one thing: change is uncomfortable. It requires acknowledging painful truths and relinquishing unearned privileges. But discomfort is not a valid reason to maintain injustice. From the corner of his eye, James spotted movement at the edge of the quad. Robert Crawford had arrived with a small group of supporters, their faces tight with disapproval. To those who oppose this vision, James continued, looking directly at Crawford, I extend an invitation, not a threat. Join us in building a Westfield that truly embodies our stated values of excellence, inclusion, and integrity. Help us become a model for higher education in America. Crawford's expression remained stony. But understand this, Westfield will change, not because of what happened to me yesterday, but because change is long overdue. The question isn't whether we will transform this institution, but who will participate in that transformation. As James concluded his remarks, the crowd's response was overwhelming. Students surged forward, many trying to shake his hand or express their support. Darius Williams approached with a list. Over 3,000 signatures on our petition supporting your presidency, collected in just 12 hours. James nodded appreciatively. What's Crawford doing now? Retreating, Darius grinned. His little group looks pretty pathetic compared to this turnout. James's phone rang. Vanessa. You're all over the morning shows, she said. CNN is calling you the face of academic leadership in the fight against institutional racism. That's a heavy title, James replied. It's an accurate one, Vanessa countered. The kids are so proud, James, so am I. As he pocketed his phone, James spotted Theodore Blackwell pushing through the crowd with an urgent expression. The board just voted, Blackwell announced breathlessly, 12-2 in favor of a public statement supporting you and censuring Crawford. He's been removed from all committee positions. Relief washed over James. And the donor situation. Marcus's pledges more than offset the losses, Blackwell confirmed. Plus, the NAACP and Urban League have both announced major scholarship funding in your honor. James absorbed this news as students continued to gather around him, many asking for selfies or offering words of encouragement. What had begun as a personal humiliation had transformed into a powerful catalyst for change. As he moved through the crowd toward his next meeting, James caught sight of Reynolds watching from the periphery, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before the former security guard turned and walked away. Some battles were personal, James reflected. Others were institutional. The challenge now was to harness this momentum for lasting transformation, not just for Westfield, but for higher education as a whole. 1 month later, James stood at the podium in Westfield's Grand Ceremonial Hall, the site of his official inauguration as president. The ornate room, usually reserved for commencement ceremonies, was filled to capacity. The university's most distinguished alumni sat alongside current students, faculty, and staff. National media occupied a designated area, cameras trained on the stage. In the front row, Vanessa beamed with pride, flanked by their children Zoe and Michael. Beside them sat Dr. Patel and Marcus Johnson, who had emerged as James's strongest allies on the board. Chairman Whitman sat stiffly nearby, his support now solid if not enthusiastic. Robert Crawford was notably absent. His resignation from the board had come 3 weeks earlier, following the publication of leaked emails showing a history of racist comments about faculty and students of color. The scandal had only strengthened James's position and accelerated his agenda for change. "1 month ago," James began, "I stood before some of you under very different circumstances. What should have been a routine morning became a flashpoint that forced our community to confront uncomfortable truths." The audience was silent, attentive. I could stand here today and pretend that incident was an aberration, one bad apple who has been removed. That would be easier, comfortable. It would allow us all to move on without deeper examination. James paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. But easy answers have never produced meaningful change. The truth is more challenging. What happened to me that morning was a symptom of broader issues that have long plagued Westfield and institutions like it across America. From his vantage point, James could see the diversity of reactions, nods of agreement, particularly from people of color, uncomfortable shifts from some older white alumni, and rapt attention from students of all backgrounds. In the past month, we've launched what I believe is the most ambitious inclusion initiative in higher education, not because it's trendy or politically expedient, but because excellence demands it. James gestured to a screen behind him, which displayed key statistics. Our first campus climate survey revealed troubling disparities in how different groups experience Westfield. While 89% of white students report feeling always welcome on campus, only 41% of black students and 53% of Latino students say the same. Murmurs rippled through the audience. These numbers reflect lived realities, not perceptions. They represent barriers to learning, to collaboration, to the free exchange of ideas that is essential to our mission. James continued, outlining the concrete changes already implemented. In 4 weeks, we've overhauled security protocols and training. We've established a bias response team with actual authority. We've created emergency funding for students facing discrimination. We've begun a curriculum review to ensure our academic offerings reflect diverse perspectives and histories. He acknowledged the resistance with candor. Yes, some donors have withdrawn support. Some alumni have expressed outrage. Several faculty members have declared these changes a threat to academic freedom. James leaned forward slightly. To them I say, examine your discomfort. Ask yourself why creating a truly inclusive campus feels threatening. Consider whether your concept of excellence is truly universal or merely familiar. In the audience, James spotted Terrence Reynolds, the security guard whose actions had catalyzed these changes. After his termination, Reynolds had reached out again, this time with a different attitude. Their conversation had been difficult but productive, leading to an unexpected development. True transformation requires both accountability and redemption, James continued. Which is why our new Campus Safety Advisory Council includes not only students and faculty of color, but also former security officer Terrence Reynolds. Surprised murmurs spread through the room. Mr. Reynolds approached me with a sincere desire to understand his actions and make amends. Rather than simply condemning him, we've created a pathway for him to contribute to the solution. He now speaks to incoming security staff about his experience and what he's learned. James could see shocked expressions, especially from students who had witnessed the original confrontation. It was a controversial decision he'd struggled with himself. Some will call this naive. Others will say it's undeserved forgiveness. I call it education in its purest form, the transformation of minds and perspectives through difficult engagement. The tension in the room was palpable. Westfield's history, like America's, contains both inspiration and injustice. We cannot change the past, but we can be honest about it. The south wing of this very building was constructed with money from slaveholders. Our beloved founder opposed integration well into the 1960s. James paused to let these uncomfortable facts settle. Acknowledging these truths doesn't diminish Westfield, it creates space for a more inclusive future. That's why we're launching the Westfield History Project, documenting both our achievements and our failures with equal rigor. As he neared his conclusion, James's voice strengthened. The true measure of our success won't be policies or programs, but the lived experiences of every person on this campus. When a black freshman can walk into any building without fearing they'll be questioned about belonging here, when faculty of color are evaluated on their work, not their identity, when we can have difficult conversations about race without defensiveness or withdrawal. then we'll know transformation is taking root. James looked directly at his family. I accept this presidency not as a personal achievement but as a profound responsibility. The work ahead is difficult. There will be setbacks and resistance, but Westfield will become a model for what higher education can and should be, not despite our past challenges but because of how we face them. As the applause began, James noticed something remarkable. The standing ovation started with students of color but quickly spread throughout the hall. Even some who had initially opposed his appointment were now on their feet. It wasn't universal support, nothing worthwhile ever was, but it was progress, tangible and real. As James embraced Vanessa and his children on stage, he caught sight of Darius Williams in the audience, the student who had organized the initial protests. Darius gave him a nod that conveyed both respect and vigilance, celebration of progress made, but determination to keep pushing forward. That balance between acknowledgement of how far they'd come and recognition of the distance yet to travel would define the years ahead. The transformation of Westfield had begun, not with grand pronouncements but with honest confrontation of difficult truths. And for James Washington, the painful morning that had thrust him into the spotlight now seemed like the necessary catalyst for change that had been too long coming.